Gail. So we're now going to have a minute each from our speakers to introduce themselves before we go to question and answer. Alistair.
Thank you. Right, why am I here? Look, trade deals are political acts. They're political acts that have commercial and economic consequences, but they are political acts. The fact that we're looking at an SPS agreement is a political achievement for Keir Starmer. I give him the credit for that, but it is one that brings for us real threats and opportunities. So if we're going to minimise the threats and maximise the opportunities, then we have got to shape the politics that will shape this deal. And one final thought, we're not just shaping the politics here, we need to be shaping the politics in Brussels again. One of the things that has really shocked me is the extent to which we have all collectively lost the muscle memory of how to engage in the European Union, how politics works in the European Union. Do that, and we might just get something that will work to our advantage.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll go to Emily.
Thank you. So why am I here? I'm here representing the Scotch whisky industry, and Scotch whisky, as Gail alluded to, is the UK's largest food and drink export. Worth £5.4 billion, it accounts for a quarter of all UK and 3/4 of all Scottish food and drink exports. But to make that a bit jazzier, that's 44 bottles every second that's exported. But we face challenges that will sound familiar to many of you in the room. Geopolitical and trade volatility, reduced consumer confidence and spending power, and increased costs of doing business. So where do we see the opportunities for our sector, which depends on our supply chain and our arable farmers? Firstly, a global growing middle class who want high quality food and drink with clear provenance and a heritage story. Through this, we can tell the story of Scotch whisky and how we're a core part of Scottish culture, rural communities, our supply chain, agriculture, tourism, hospitality, and of course the importance of responsible alcohol consumption. But to realise that, we need the right trading environment. We need to realise the potential of the UK-India FTA. We need to secure a return to tariff-free trade, a permanent return to tariff-free trade with the US, our largest export market, and opening new export markets to deliver that economic growth across the UK, across our supply chain, and globally.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rizvan?
Hi everyone, I'm MD Euroquality Lambs. We're a large family-based, export-orientated abattoir in South Shropshire, and a third of UK lamb, as many of you will know, is exported. Exports are fundamental to our whole lamb trade. We as a business were 75% export prior to Brexit. Now we're more like 65%. And even us as a business, between us and the importers, are incurring close to £500,000 of costs per year due to export declarations, import checks, customs checks, etc. So for us, the SPS agreement couldn't come soon enough for the whole sector.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we've got a great panel here, and I'm really keen to get engagement from the floor as well as the app, and also to hear from voices on the floor that maybe haven't spoken yet at any of the OFC conferences. So, can we... Thank you. Okay, so let's get some hands up, please. Let's get some good engagement going. And also, if we could try and keep the questions quite short, because I'm quite keen to get quite a good discussion going, because time just ticks away. Okay, let's go for it.
To make British produce really stand out, we need to tackle a problem that is actually on our shores already. And that is labelling of food in supermarkets. Imported food from other countries being labelled as Nightingale farms, Woodside farms in the major supermarkets, which are quite often imported from countries such as Egypt and elsewhere in Africa and in Europe as well. And that undercuts our own producers and drives our own that drives the own costs of foods down that we produce. And it also means that it takes away from our own brand identity. How do you suggest we develop our brand identity as UK food and drink producers and deal with this labelling issue so that consumers aren't misinformed either?
Great question. Okay, I'm going to go with Gail first.
Great. Well, thank you for the question. And it's great that we've got Baroness Batters in the front row, because I know that was one of the recommendations, was around the sort of misleading use of labels to suggest, to infer that there is a British characteristic, part British trait. And to me, that sounds like it is misleading, that it is unfair, and there certainly should be remedies to that. How do we then and that should sort of be dealt with, how do we then make the most in terms of embracing our fantastic products? I think we do already do a lot of that, as Emily and others have mentioned. Around the world, the provenance, the standards, the heritage of British products is really well recognised. The Union Jack obviously goes a long way in doing that. What it needs is, overseas, it needs cultivating, it needs continual action in terms of raising our profile. We've got the 16 agattaches that are working all around the world in different embassies all around the world on our behalf. We have a team from DBT, Market Access, that also work out there on behalf. From an NFU perspective, we would love to see more resources doing that for us, out there, boots on the ground, doing that promotion for us.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we might also come back to some of these points as well, but I'm going to go to number 1 across there. Thank you.
I'm Henry Reynolds. I'm a farmer and a director of Cam Grain, which is is the country's largest cooperative grain store. Brexit has been used as an excuse and a political scapegoat for all sorts of things. But to go back to the initial presentation we had here, it was actually a brilliant opportunity to set our own policy and direction. And one of the places we have actually achieved that, and I believe in a world-leading sense, was on SFI. The implementation might not have been great at times, but the ambition was certainly world-leading. So what I want to know is, how do we avoid, by dynamic aligning with Europe, who are somewhat behind on that sense, actually stepping backwards for biodiversity and regenerative farming, etc., when we've already got the world-leading solution?
Great, thank you, Henry. Okay, Alistair, I'm going to go to you first for this one.
Yeah, well, I think you've heard this morning already from Emma Reynolds that SFI is still an emerging picture. And there's a lot of good stuff there that you do want to retain. But also, if you look at the future of our trading relationship, especially with the European Union, you have to recognise that they have gone back in the CAP to a scheme where area-based payment and support for production is hardwired into the CAP 2028 to 2034. So we risk actually putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage as we re-engage with that market. I think what I would like to see with the next round of SFI is a better understanding and a better connection with food production, because actually I think the best way to achieve the goals of sustainability, nature restoration, climate mitigation and the rest of it is by using land to produce food. And parenthetically, beyond that, then actually to have a clear idea of what it means for us as a nation when we talk about food security. How much do we want to produce domestically? How much are we prepared to import? Where should that then be done? So it is that lack of strategy which then feeds into the construction of schemes like SFI that I see as being the problem and the challenge for the new administration in DEFRA.
Great, thank you. I'm also going to bring Rizvan in here as part of your experience on this, so yes.
Yeah, so we are out of Europe now, and we have the opportunity to shape the market as we are, but when we're going to be engaging with our biggest market on our neighbours, we need to be able to follow their rules as a customer. And when you want to do business with people, you have to work together to find the best way of serving that market so that it's a win-win situation. So there will be opportunities for us in the UK to have rules shaped to our agricultural needs over here, but we also need to be mindful about, similar to what Alistair said about what's happening, how the farmers elsewhere are being compensated for their land, which may be disadvantageous to us, to try to see how we can make the alignment in a way that suits us, but also enables us to do the trade in a frictionless way.
Great, that balance, you know, yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to go here. Number 5, please.
I'm Andrew Teamby. I work in the Rural Research Team at Savills Farm in Lincolnshire, and I'm here as an OFC Inspire delegate. My question relates to trade barriers. Under my understanding, trade barriers can relate to human health issues, but they can't relate to production standards. And that means, as our standards are driven higher within the country, that puts our farmers at a disadvantage. And my question is, do World Trade Organization rules need to evolve, and how can our industry respond to this issue?
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to go to both Gail and Emily here. Yeah.
So the answer is yes, I would say. And again, not to reference Minette, who's sitting right in front of me, but again, it was something that was picked up and certainly something that's been advocated by the NFU for many years, that we have to have consistency in terms of ambition, in terms of what we do with our domestic regulatory standards and what we do in terms of trade policy. We cannot, on one hand, continue to push up the standards and then let imports that don't meet those standards undermine our producers. So yes, there would be, in theory, there is difficulty at the WTO to implement production methods, sort of restrictions in that sense. The world is changing. I mean, look what's happening just now with tariffs. I think the NFU, we would say that we would want to work with the WTO to explore this, to think about the values that matter to us in the 21st century. High animal welfare standards, being proud of our environmental outcomes. Those are things that matter to us in the 21st century. Those are things that we should be advocating the WTO, that we should be allowed to uphold and protect.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Emily, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a Scotch whisky perspective, and actually maybe just take a step back without getting into trade policy wonkery, which is, you know, very complex and not always the most exciting bit. But at the WTO, you know, there is this idea that it's falling apart, and because of the US primarily. Now, certainly it needs to evolve, but actually the US has refunded the WTO this year, and that's slightly gone under the radar. So there is still engagement with the WTO. And for our industry, that's been really important at having that space to look at what regulations are coming in. Are they trade disruptive? Are they a trade barrier? And so that's important for us as an export product. It's also important, obviously, looking at imports. And for us, when it comes to standards, we are really clear as the Scotch whisky industry around the importance of high standards for whisky so that we can compete on a level playing field. Now, that won't be a message that, you know, doesn't chime with others in the room and other sectors. But that's really critical for us, protecting the Scotch whisky GI, protecting the whisky definition. And the WTO has been a key way that we've been able to do that, as well as bilateral engagement. And we can't think of those as two separate routes. Gail mentioned the ag attaches, and those kind of initiatives are great for us to have that bilateral engagement with other countries to engage on regulatory development.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go to question 4, and then I'm going to do one in the app. And I'd love to hear another young voice from the audience, please. So number 4, that would be great, thank you.
I'm not so young, but...
No, you are young, yeah, you are.
I'm a farmer from the Peak District, and we farm beef and sheep. The statistics that were held up earlier on about reductions in export to Europe aren't purely based on Brexit. So those statistics were there from 2019, but if you look at the numbers of actual animals we have, that needed to be reflected in that statistic, because the statistics are lie. So if you want to build trust in this audience, you can't start with statistics that are lies. So when you're saying that poultry's dropped 37% on its exports to Europe, that's because we haven't got 37% worth of poultry to export. And that's because of all the other hold-ups that we have in the development and the trust that farmers have to invest in their buildings. If you look at what poultry we actually have in this country, it will have reduced by more than 37% in total. So the very fact that we are now exporting less is for those reasons. It's not for political reasons. A lot of it is our own domestic policy that prevents farmers from growing, and the fact that we've had persistent problems with disease and the weather. So 2018 was the beast from the east, followed by one of the driest summers on record. Those are the things that are affecting stock numbers that then in turn affect our ability to export.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Gail, I'll let you just answer that. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm very happy to sort of take that head on. I mean, you can present statistics to tell any story that you want, and those are in terms of the volume reductions. We have seen, as Rizvan will talk about, real business impact, the ability to extract as much value from the European market as a result of Brexit. But I absolutely agree. There are other factors. I use 2019 as the baseline in terms of the last year of normal. There's been so many other things that have happened since then, whether it is COVID, whether it is the beast from the east, as you say, as it is. The poultry one particularly, granted, because of the volumes that we'd be exporting to the EU would have been low anyway, so any statistical change will be amplified given the small numbers. But in reality, we have businesses, and maybe Rizvan can talk more about this, the impact on our exporting businesses for livestock products.
Great. I thank every one of the panel members. I'm just conscious of time here, just to give everybody a voice, so we'll just let panel members. You can actually go off. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll just go across the panel, just very briefly, and then we can take some more from the app. Yep.
Okay. I think livestock numbers are absolutely critical. We had Emma Reynolds and two of our directors in front of the Select Committee just before Christmas. I said, right, so your farming roadmap when it comes, what is it going to say about livestock numbers? Because we've seen a decrease in cattle and sheep numbers of about 15% over the last 10 years. Do you want that to continue? Because there are people who do. Do you want to stabilise it? Do you want to bring it back up? I could give you ideas for all three options. And the director from DEFRA said, oh, well, I would be astonished if the farming roadmap said anything about livestock numbers. Now, just think about that. Food security is national security, but if George Robertson, when he did the Strategic Defence Review, had produced a piece of work that did not have a view on how big your Army, Navy and your Air Force should have been, he would have been ridiculed, and rightly so. So if we're going to have these big strategic pieces of work, then actually they have got to be proper strategies, and they have got to come to a meaningful definition of what we mean by food security, because otherwise it's only ever going to be a soundbite. It's never going to be anything meaningful.
Thank you, Alistair. Emily.
I think just very quick to take a step back, there's a really important point there around join up of policy making across Whitehall. The domestic policies that we put in place need to meet the ambitions that we have in our trade strategy. You know, we see this domestically as an industry where what we're doing at home is not what we want to see other countries do, or what we're doing at home doesn't support the ability for our businesses to grow. And that's not unique to our sector. So having that join-up policy making, don't think anyone's cracked that nut yet, but how you look at all that join-up between DBT, DEFRA, health, HMT, etc., is critical to have that export success.
Brilliant. Rizvan.
Yeah, look, I'll partly agree with what you're saying. You know, there are other factors that affect the livestock numbers, and that has, obviously, we have less product, there's less to export. You know, there's issues around the farming policy, issues around succession planning, issues around the size of the farms. But to suggest that Brexit isn't having a sizable impact is not accurate, because there's a lot of smaller operators who have just stopped exporting because they cannot put up with the paperwork and the bureaucracy and the effort in Rwanda. And that's just fact. We, as a large operator, we can dedicate the time and resources to it, but even our numbers proportionally has gone down. And that's not purely about the throughput, it is a significant effect as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've got just 5 more minutes, and the app has got a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one question from the app, and I've got 2 from the floor, and the other questions that are on the app, I'm going to give them to the panel members to take away and answer. Would that be okay? There's some really interesting ones here, but very quickly, please can we hear your views of a hard stop? What does that mean for a crop grown to GB rules in 2026 for export to the EU in 27-28, either from store or as an ingredient in an alcoholic drink? Okay, so Emily.
So I think for us what's really critical in that is that transition. We absolutely depend on our agricultural supply chain. Scotch whisky is made of 3 ingredients, and the core one of that is cereals. So making sure there's that transition to secure that supply chain and support our farmers and growers who go into Scotch whisky is critical. For us as well, it's again that join up of policy making. One of the things that is in scope for us is alcohol labelling rules or food labelling rules. The EU is looking at changes, the UK is looking at changes. We can't have multiple changes in short succession. So making sure that that thought process is applied across the board is critical.
Great, thank you. Number 4.
Hi, my name is Gail Aradotter. I support organisations with innovation. We've got a flourishing innovation sector in the UK in agriculture. How can we support those companies better to access wider markets, in your view?
Thank you. I was struggling to hear, so could you just speak a little bit louder?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, or maybe not put the microphone too close, just a little bit, like a bit louder when you speak.
Okay,
that's
fine, that's it. So I work with startup businesses and research organisations on innovation. And there's a flourishing innovation sector in the UK in agriculture, but these companies need access to wider markets. And with your experience, I'm interested in hearing what you think we can do to help those companies access those markets better and scale up faster, because that's critical to their success.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's actually quite a nice question just to end on about new starts and getting that confidence to export, yes? So I think we'll just kind of get views from all the panel members on that. That would be really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to go with this side first, actually. Rizvan.
It's for the industry and startups to identify which markets they feel they're going to get the most value out of exporting to. If you're small, you can't export to everywhere, so you have to target where will you find the most value from, and really speak through the DBT, Department of Business and Trade, to see to them that this is what we want to market to, how can you support us in that, and there should be the right mechanisms in there. If not, going through trade associations like yourself to lobby them to prioritise those markets, because the government, from our experience, will prioritise markets where there's enough demand for those markets, but they'll need to have their lobbying effort there to make sure that they know which markets to prioritise.
Great, thank you.
I think just very quickly to build on that, in that engagement, it's really important. Obviously, tariffs coming down is critical, but if a tariff comes down, you can't access the market due to other regulatory barriers. It can be a bit meaningless. That's really important, having that engagement. So identifying what the barriers are and what do you need to overcome them, and being really clear in that. That's something that we are focused on as tariffs come down in some of our key export markets.
Excellent.
This is not unique to food production. I think it goes across business and business and government as a whole. Ronald Reagan once famously said that the scariest words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." And this comes really to the question of how we do government. And I'll promise you this, that if you wait for government to give you a strategy for take spin out or whatever else it's going to be, then it will be one that doesn't work. So if we take more control away from the centre, away from Whitehall, and this is a job of politicians, to drive the engagement between officials and business and communities right across the whole country in a much more decentralised way, so that the people in this room are the ones who can inform the way in which you drive out your startups. That way, you might actually begin to get something that your clients actually need.
Great, thank you. Gail?
And then just to add, in terms of at a practical level, there is support in terms of DBT market access advisors based around the country. They run programs like mentoring, for example, to help start-up businesses to be mentored with more experienced exporters to be able to understand the processes, the risks, the opportunities. So there are some things that are available already. Previously, we had the Food and Drink Export Council, and that was something that did look from an agri-food perspective around, well, what are the barriers to trade, how can we grow exports, how can we incentivise small and micro-sized businesses export more. And I would like to think that moving forward with the new Food and Farming Partnership Board that will be established, that looking at exports and what the challenges are could be part of that.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the questions on the app and also on the floor. And I'm sorry that I couldn't take some questions, but our speakers will be around today over lunch and this afternoon and tomorrow as well. But please give us a round of applause for our speakers. Much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to now take the opportunity to introduce our Oxford Farming Conference Director, Ali Capper, to the stage. Ali, thank you. And we'll just head up.